Welcome back. We're talking about China's relationship with Iran and the country's role in the One Belt, One Road initiative. Still with us, Mohammad Marandi is a political analyst. He Wenping is with the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and William Engdahl is an author and geopolitical analyst. So, William, let me start with you. For this part of the show, as Dr. Marandi pointed out, this is an important part of the world, but it's also a volatile part of the world, which is susceptible to all kinds of influences, which is susceptible to the export of the radical brand of Islam that we see in some parts of the Middle East. Has China taken the view that the best way to achieve stability in this part of the world is through economic growth, through economic relationships, rather than talk about regime change and threats that everything is on the table, etc.? As China is saying, no, the way to this is to build up our economic relationship.
I very much agree with that. The problem is the Western nations, especially my own country, the United States, and Britain, for its part, NATO, do not agree with that, and they are trying to stir up trouble and friction in every part of the world, especially toward China with the South China Sea conflict, and with Russia with the Ukraine conflict, to break relations between Russia and continental Europe, the European Union, especially Germany. So, and then the war in Syria is adding to that, the whole so-called Arab Spring, where the U.S. State Department and the U.S. intelligence services are up to their necks in dirty operations in those countries to simply create massive regime changes and justification for NATO militarization of the oil fields of the Middle East. The Silk Road space is a geopolitical nightmare. If you go back to the father of Western geopolitics, Sir Alfred Mackinder, in 1919, after the First World War and the Treaty at Versailles, he actually spelled out a geopolitical diagram of the world where he said the nation who controls Central Europe, or who controls Central Europe, meaning Germany, France, Poland, and so on, controls the Eurasian landmass, the heartland, which he largely meant Russia, but also China at later times. And who controls the heartland of Eurasia, controls the world island, which goes down to Iran and the entire rich oil regions of the Middle East, and who controls the world island, controls the world. And Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, all the leading voices of post-war American foreign policy are rooted in that version of geopolitics, and it's a preordained recipe for disaster, as we've seen. So I think the Silk Road and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is increasingly aware of these color revolutions in Uzbekistan or Kyrgyzstan or the various other stands along the Silk Road. In China itself, Xinjiang province has significant problems with the Uyghur, and Turkey is not innocent of feeding those problems, recruiting students who then are sent to Syria and become Wahhabite jihadists and are sent back in to make trouble in Western China, where all the oil pipelines and oil fields of China, most of them, crisscross between Kazakhstan, Russia, and China. So there definitely has to be an active and effective counterterrorism component to the new Silk Road. And I think the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which includes all of Central Asia, China, and Russia, and now I fully expect that by the next annual meeting of SCO this coming summer or later in the year, that Iran will be also admitted, as have Pakistan and India in last year's SCO meeting. And there you will have the basis for a very effective defense of a positive development in Eurasia. And that's good for the entire world.
Right. Dr. Marandi, of course, these two countries are not just talking about building their trade relationship. President Rouhani said that the two nations, Iran and China, have agreed to cooperate on issues like terrorism and combating extremism, especially the extremism that comes out of places like Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and Yemen. What form does that cooperation take?
Well, I believe it will probably include elements of intelligence and intelligence cooperation, but also I think at a more strategic level, and the two countries will be cooperating. We have to keep into account one of the major advantages of Central Asia is the fact that it is not accessible to international powers like the United States, therefore, or other potential antagonists. So, for example, when Iran trades with China through sea, there is potential that some power or some antagonist could impede trade relations. Central Asia does not have that problem. It also the extra advantage is that it is much closer to China. The distance between northeastern Iran and western China is actually quite short, and a very short air flight is needed to travel from one country to the other. However, the problem again is that just like in Syria and Iraq, no one expected 2 decades ago, that these countries would grow so unstable, largely because of extremism which has been exported there by Saudi Arabia, by Turkey, as the previous guest rightly pointed out, and by Western powers. We know that, for example, the former head of the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency and the Pentagon admitted that the United States took a willful decision to help these neighboring countries in Syria and Iraq to export Wahhabi extremists to these countries. So the potential is there for foreign powers who wish to impede greater cooperation between Iran, Russia, China, and Central Asian countries. The potential is there for them to stir up trouble. And therefore, it's very important for the intelligence services to work together, but also for the countries to coordinate in developing the region in order to prevent mass unemployment, from helping to increase the number of people that could be attracted to Saudi Wahhabi extremism.
Dr. He, what is the Chinese view on this? How do you see the political, strategic, diplomatic relationship between China and Iran grow in the future?
I think, as we discussed above, not only the economic cooperation now existing between China and Iran, and also not only this economic cooperation can serve as a very solid foundation for those extremism, those ideology now widespreading. So I think apart from that, in order to strengthen and consolidate the very good political and diplomatic and strategic relations between China and Iran, we have to establish this bilateral relation in a comprehensive way, which is like anti-terror, like security cooperation, and also political cooperation, diplomatic cooperation should be undertaken in an all-round way. For example, like this anti-terror, even though China, at the moment, we haven't, like Russian had done, send our, airplane, firefighter, those soldiers, or the special forces all the way to the frontier. But we can do like intelligence sharing, intelligence information sharing, and also like the training. And another thing I think we can do is education, because those extremism ideology now is, I think that's the root causes for all those potential, terrorists. So those terrorists, at the very beginning, they are just ordinary people. They are the ordinary youth. So why they are turn themselves from a citizen and then becoming a terrorist? Because they have been penetrated with those like Wahhabism and also this those very extremist ideology. So the education and also even the religions should be taught in a very correct way. So it's not saying when you mention somebody they are Muslim or they believe the Islam, and then people are thinking, oh, they are the dangerous people. But I think this is a distortion about those Islam itself. So actually, education is very important. So in our like a Western area, like Xinjiang and then Qinghai and those vast area in our western part, so I think this challenge is quite huge. So we also have like hundreds those people, youth people, they trying to go to the Syria and go to the even the Iraqi to join those holy war. So I think we can do a lot together with Iran to stop those trends.
William, to the point you made just a moment ago on stability in Central Asia, the Council on Foreign Relations, which is a United States-based think tank, it produced a paper in which it said it remains to be seen if the United States and China will clash over their competing plans for developing energy resources in Central Asia's Turkmenistan, creating infrastructure in Pakistan, or winning political influence with governments throughout Asia. Given that, are we going to see increasing competition to, find favor with these governments between Washington and Beijing?
Well, there's going to be military tensions, and whoever is elected president in November, that will increase between China and Washington. The energy competition is really a chimera in my view, because the collapse of the U.S. shale industry that's underway as we speak right now, and has been underway for more than a year since the collapse in oil prices in September of 2014, the agreement between John Kerry and the then King of Saudi Arabia, Abdullah, who's since deceased, that has collapsed the growth point of the U.S. oil and gas industry. They're talking about export of natural gas to Europe, to China, whatever, LNG, but it's not doable. The financial resources from Wall Street banks are not there to rebuild this battered thing called the shale industry. So there is not the resource base to compete successfully with Iran and with Russia and the other countries of Eurasia. And it's largely a bluff or a bluster from Washington to keep these countries from cooperating more closely. It's not working, however.
And that's where we are going to have to end it. F. William Engdahl, Dr. Mohammad Marandi, Dr. He Wenping, thanks to all of you for joining us.